Chapter 6. Boarding. We were up early, eating a quick breakfast with Throm. He told us Gam and Grog were already at the docks getting things ready. Once we finished, the three of us made our way down to the waterfront, where a somber silence lingered in the air. Usually alive with noise and motion, the docks were strangely subdued. Word had spread. Most of the townfolk already knew it was coming. They stood at a distance, watching, waiting. The council members were present, all except Villaheim, who remained in his cell awaiting judgment. Rieger had returned last night and now sat in a chair petting his all-black cat, Ralphie, his constant companion on hunting trips. Not far off, Grog leaned against a stack of crates, his axe resting within arm's reach. He puffed on his pipe, looking smug as we approached the edge where the pier met the cobblestone road. "Well, about time you showed up. We've been waiting all morning," he said gruffly. I glanced at Throm, who shook his head and replied, "No, we're still waiting on Reggie." Keenan chuckled, looking at Grog. "You haven't changed a bit." Grog's lips curled slightly in response. Gamriel stepped forward. "Once Reggie gets here, we'll finalize everything. None of the guards are willing to board the ship, and I don't blame them, so they'll hold the line back here with Grog and Throm. If you're up for it, you boys can come aboard with me and Rieger." Rieger's agreed to scout ahead. We're the quietest and most familiar with traps, in case there are any. Or worse. I looked at Keenan. He gave a nod. Smiling, I said, "Yeah, we'll help." Gam nodded. Good, good. He placed his hand on my shoulder. "No taking chances." I grinned. "When have I ever done that?" He snorted. "If I'd made you a tabard, it'd have wolves on it." I winced, but smiled at the jab. "Fair enough," I chuckled. After saying good morning to Rieger, Reggie suddenly appeared beside Gam. "Well, are we ready?" he asked, his words tumbling out in a blur. "I stayed up all night preparing. We've got what we need plus a few contingencies. But this won't be easy. The ship is full of energy, and one type I still can't identify." Gam waited patiently as Reggie rambled, knowing he'd have to breathe eventually. "My energy reserves are full," Reggie continued, barely pausing, "and I've been charging my emergency reserve container too." He pulled out a small crystalline orb, glowing bright with stored power, and set it on a nearby crate. Yes, should be able to drop the force field. Give you 10, maybe 15 minutes, depending on what's powering it. I can probably clear the fear effect too, but that's something else. I don't know what it is. Smells bad. No. Good? No. I can't tell, but it's new, definitely new." Gam jumped in, outlining the boarding plan with crisp efficiency. Reggie nodded along, then added, "Look, no guarantees I can hold it. I have no idea how fast the energy will burn. This is all uncharted territory. I've only read about demons, never tested any of this. If the field regenerates, you may have to disable it from the inside. Worst case, it could take me hours to recharge and try again." Leaning towards Keenan, I whispered, "Energy reserves? What's he talking about?" Keenan whispered back, "Everyone has some base level of magical energy. It's like a muscle. You can train it, but your ceiling depends on your natural strength. Some people have bigger reserves. You can supplement with artifacts or stored energy, but that can be risky." "Ah," I nodded. "Got it, thanks." As I mulled over his explanation, my thoughts drifted to the Queen and the Princess. Their power had to come from somewhere. How deep did their reserves run? And how far were they from reaching their full potential? Suddenly, Reggie muttered a few words and cast a spell, then looked up. "Ready?" "Wait, what did you just do?" I asked. "Oh, I put a shield around the shield," he said casually. I frowned. "Why?" "I thought we were taking the shield down." Reggie shrugged. "In case disabling it triggers an explosion. No reason to blow up the entire town," he added nonchalantly. "Great," Keenan muttered. "That makes me feel so much better." "Wait, explode?" I asked, alarmed. Reggie shrugged again. "Doubt it, but let's go." With that, he turned his attention to the glowing orb and began focusing on whatever spell he had in mind. My fear eased slightly as I stood waiting, watching for any sign of movement. I glanced at Gam, about to speak, but he cut me off with a quick, "No, don't do that." He picked up a rock, gave me a sly smile, and tossed it. The rock struck the side of the ship with a dull thud before plopping into the water. "The shield's down now," Gam said, still grinning. I shook my head, smiling despite myself. Rieger darted silently up the gangplank and vanished into the ship, with Gam close behind. I took a deep breath and followed, Keenan right behind me. The ship felt grimy, slick with a kind of oily residue. I hesitated to touch anything. We moved forward, checking the bow for anything unusual before heading towards the stern. But aside from the ship's all-black hull and the filth coating its wooden ropes, nothing stood out. Rieger and Gam were already below deck by the time we reached the ladder. Just as we were about to follow, Gam reappeared and signaled for silence, gesturing for us to come down. We crept after him and found ourselves in a room filled with bunks. Each bunk held what looked like skeletons, peaceful at first glance, but their jaws were twisted at unnatural angles and skeletal fingers clutched rusty weapons. A chill crept down my spine. Keenan focused on one of the skeletons, eyes closed, sensing for something. Rieger silently motioned to Gam that he was heading further below. Gam nodded and gestured for me to follow him towards the aft section. Sword in hand, I moved beside him to a closed door. He drew his daggers and mouthed 1, 2, 3 before slowly easing it open. Dim light filtered through nearly blacked-out glass panes. The flicker of an oil lamp revealed a cluttered desk piled with papers and charts. A disheveled bed sat in the back, surrounded by several locked chests. In the darkest corner of the room stood a large bird cage, and inside a crumpled, motionless figure. Gam began rifling through the papers as I approached the cage. As I drew closer, the figure stirred. Her head snapped up. A young woman, mid-20s, malnourished, filthy, wild red hair framed a face streaked with crime, and her fierce green eyes burned with fire. She spat at me and spoke in a harsh, rapid language I didn't recognize. Startled, I looked at Gam, who paused mid-search, staring at the cage. "That sounds like a northern tongue," he said, "from the cold lands, up north." I shrugged, unfamiliar. Then the woman switched to a flawless common, her accent heavy but clear. "Why are you here?" Gam stepped forward cautiously. "The people on this ship attacked us. We want to know why." Her expression darkened. "Did you kill them all?" "As far as we know," Gam replied. She exhaled slowly, her posture softening just a little. "Good," she muttered. "They killed my family." I watched her, heart tightening. "What's your name?" She struggled to speak, her voice dry and cracked, but managed Valkara. I turned to Gam. "I'm letting her out," I said, voice low and resolute. Gam didn't take his eyes off her, but gave a small nod. Valkara lifted a trembling hand and gestured toward the desk. "The key's in there." I retrieved it, unlocked the cage, and helped her step out. She could barely stand, even though it was clear she had once been strong, athletic even. "How long were you in there?" I asked. She sighed, staring into the distance. "I don't know, but it felt like weeks." Gam quietly moved to her side and eased her into a chair beside the cage. "What happened?" he asked gently. Her voice was distant, hollow. "They opened portals to my island and started attacking. The men were away, fighting off another island that had raided our fisheries. All we had left were women and children, but we fought until only 5 of us remained." Her jaw tightened. "They found where we'd hidden the children and promised to spare them if we surrendered, so we did." Her voice faltered, but pressed on. "Once we laid down our arms, they killed everyone, including the children. Everyone but me. They discovered I was the chief's daughter and kept me as a bargaining chip." She paused, swallowing hard. 2 days later, our men returned. The invaders demanded they surrender. My father looked at me and I smiled, told him with my eyes, "Don't surrender, they'll kill you anyway." Tears welled, but she didn't let them fall. They fought, valiantly, but they all fell. I watched my people be annihilated. Her voice dropped to a whisper. "The leader spared me. I never found out why." She spat on the ground at the mention of him. I looked at Gam and shook my head. His expression was tight, processing, calculating, like he was piecing together a puzzle too awful to finish. Just then Keenan stepped into the room, drawn by the sound of our voices. The moment Valkara saw him, her eyes went wide with fury. Her hand shot out, grabbing 2 small axes from the wall. She turned on Keenan, rage twisting her face, but her body gave out. She collapsed to her knees, the axes hitting the floor with a dull thud. "You'll pay for what your people did," she rasped, trembling, trying to lift the weapons again, but too weak. Keenan stood frozen, watching her struggle. She tried once more, then finally slumped, spent. "I'm sorry, Father," she gasped. "I failed you." Keenan moved slowly, silently. He knelt before her. He lifted her chin with gentle hands, his voice low and full of sorrow. "I'm not your enemy." She stared at him confused, pain clouding her eyes. Then her eyelids fluttered and she collapsed unconscious. Keenan gently lifted her into his arms. Grief spread across his face as he looked at us trying to speak, but no words came. He lowered his head and turned, carrying her out of the room. Gam exhaled and shook his head. So much senseless violence, and for what? Shaken by what we just heard, but mindful of the ticking clock, we resumed our search of the cabin. Several chests were filled with weapons, likely trophies taken from victims and the crew had slaughtered. I moved to the desk while Gam rifled through one of the larger trunks. As I searched the drawers, my fingers brushed against an odd seam in the wood. I pulled gently, revealing a false bottom. Inside lay a cluster of smooth, dark stones, 20 or so in total, each one unnaturally cold to the touch. Gam, I called quietly. He stepped over and his expression darkened the moment he saw them. How? He whispered, shaking his head. This can't be good. He swiftly gathered the stones into a small cloth bag. Tell no one, he added grimly. I nodded, saying nothing. Rieger appeared in the doorway, face unreadable. I need you downstairs, he said flatly. I don't know. He paused, searching for the words, and just shook his head and turned away. We followed Rieger immediately, but as we passed through the bunk room, something caught my eye. Between two warped planks in the wall, I noticed a subtle gap. Avoiding the skeletons, I knelt and pried it open, revealing a small compartment. Inside sat a wooden box with a folded parchment resting on top. I unfolded it carefully. The parchment was covered in entries, dates, locations, name, cargo notes. The top corners were smudged with salt water, erasing the writer's name, but the content remained legible. One section described the crew's unease when men with red eyes began joining their ranks. Some sailors left, others grew quiet, strange, then they too began to change. The writer's fear bled through the page. He stayed only for the money, one final run to rescue his family from the slums. The last entry was scrawled in a frantic, shanky handwriting. It spoke of a burning sensation inside, growing worse by the day. I fear I don't have much time, it read. The write ended abruptly. I stared at the page, fist clenched. Another innocent life twisted and destroyed by whatever darkness was behind all this. 3 days ago, we didn't even know these demons existed. Now, we're just trying to understand how and why. I sighed and slipped the parchment into my pocket before heading below the deck. The hold reeked of heat and decay. At its center pulsed a strange, glowing orb, organic and unnatural. Tubes from its nearby burners, each filled with goopy, grayish paste I didn't want to examine too closely. The sight alone made my stomach turn. Gam and Rieger were already there, discussing the orb in hushed tones. They guessed it might be the power source, but neither could figure out how to disable it safely. Then I heard something, a voice, whispering, calling. I spun around. No one was there. Again the voice, faint but clear. It was coming from the orb. Before I realized what I was doing, my hand had started to rise. Gam and Rieger shouted, but I couldn't stop. The instant my fingers touched the surface, a blinding flash erupted. I found myself standing in a stark white void. No walls, no floor. Yet the space felt impossibly vast, and claustrophobically small. In front of me, a wisp-like figure floated in the air, pulsing faintly. "Hello," she said softly. Startled, I replied, "Hello. Where am I?" "You are not like the others," the voice answered. "No," I said cautiously. "They're a dwarf and an elf." The wisp paused, then spoke again. "No. Why are you here?" "We're trying to stop evil men from hurting people," I said. A strange calm washed over me, soothing but also draining. My limbs felt heavy, my eyelids drooped. "You do not have much time," the voice said gently. "Please, help me." I sank to my knees, breath shallow. "What do you need me to do?" "You must freely allow me to bind my spirit to you," she urged, "so I can use you as a bridge to escape, so I can attach and be carried away." "I don't understand," I whispered. "Will you hurt anyone if I do?" "Please help me. Time is gone." Before I could fully grasp her meaning, the white space vanished and I collapsed on the floor of the ship, gasping. Gam and Rieger knelt beside me, faces lined with concern. "Your mind was somewhere else," Rieger said quietly. Before I could respond, shouts rang out above deck. "Time's up," Gam snapped. "We need to move." They helped me to my feet, but something inside me stirred, an instinct I couldn't explain. I could still hear her voice, soft and pleading. Please. And with that, I reached toward the orb again, shouting in my mind, I want to help. The orb flared with a surge of violent energy, shaking the ship as Gammenrieger dragged me to the stairs. The pulse intensified. Waves of force tore through the vessel, the deck shuddering beneath our feet. Chaos had erupted above. Throm and Grog shouted for everyone to take cover on the dock, while Reggie stood at the edge of the gangplank, struggling to contain the magical surge. His face was pale, drenched in sweat. Keenan pushed against the roaring energy, trying to reach us, barely able to stay upright. The ship groaned, wood creaking, cracking. A deafening screech split the air, and we all cried out in pain. Then, with a final explosive pulse, the world went white. When I opened my eyes, I froze. The ship was pristine. Gleaming wood, bright white sails, everything clean, renewed as if untouched by corruption. Gammenrieger helped me to my feet, but before we could move, a voice rang out, firm, commanding. I would not do that if I were you. We turned. A glowing wisp floated before us, hovering just off the deck. If you intend to harm him, she warned, you will die. No, I said quickly, they were helping me. The wisp drifted through me, her presence brushing against my thoughts. I sense no fault in you or your companion, she said silently. I accept your word. The light shifted, reshaping from the form into the form of a woman, featureless yet graceful, cloaked in a flowing white. I am a life form without physical shape, she said. I was taken from my world by the evil ones. My energy was drained to power their devices. I am sorry for any harm that was caused. She turned to me. When you freed me, we became linked. I can now communicate with you telepathically. I nodded, still stunned. You are different, she continued. That is why I could speak to you, and why you were able to break me free. Thank you. I have created a field around this ship using the small one's knowledge. It allows me to remain here. I do not yet know how to return to my world, but until then, I will help you. She paused, her glowing form flickering softly. Halvar, she said, facing me. Hello, I said, finding my voice again. These are my friends. I introduced the others, who still stood in stunned silence. I must rest, she said, already fading back into her wisp form. I find your method of communication taxing. Her voice echoed in my mind one last time. Thank you, my champion. And then she was gone. We stood in silence, looking at each other, unsure of what to say. Suddenly Reggie popped up on deck, his face alight with excitement. Well, that was amazing. I never thought I'd see or experience anything so incredible. Did you see the Wisp Lady and the magic? Ha! He exclaimed, words tumbling out so fast they blurred together. His eyes sparkled, his energy contagious. Keenan leaned toward me and whispered, He lost me at never. I laughed as Reggie continued his animated rambling. Around us the dock began returning to normal, the air buzzing with chatter about the ship's transformation and everything that had just happened. Grog grumbled about the lack of a fight, grabbed his axe, and headed back to the inn. Throm mentioned he had orders to fill in the armory, and made his way to the blacksmith shop. Gam said he needed to speak with the council about holding a vote to replace Wilhelm and to decide his fate. Reggie was still going, his words now approaching another language and speed, when just before Gam could leave, he darted over, said something completely unintelligible, and vanished in a flash of light. Keenan chuckled. He's like a kid on those sugar sticks we had growing up. Man, those things were crazy, I said, smiling at the memory. Around us the dock workers, now more at ease, whistled and sang as they worked. Some offered handshakes and smiles as we passed, the tension of the morning finally lifting. Rieger approached, his expression unreadable. Can you join me at the inn? There's something we need to discuss. We nodded. With nothing left to do, everyone else already gone, we followed him out of the dockyard district through the market and into the inn. It was bustling with the lunch rush, filled with noise, laughter, and the clatter of mugs and plates, proof that for now the ship was no longer a concern. We found an open table in the corner and ordered drinks. Rieger, the quiet, skilled elf who had mentored us in hunting and tracking as teenagers, leaned in once the drinks arrived. The elders think this could be the start of the Second War, he said gravely. I raised an eyebrow, way to ease us into some light conversation. Keenan sighed. Yeah, nothing like world-ending event to brighten your day. Rieger continued. This has all the signs of the First War, the one that scattered the people and tore the land into islands. The elders believe someone is searching for the dwarves' homeland. They think an ancient weapon or power is hidden there. I frowned. The dwarves are secretive, sure, but an ancient weapon? That sounds far-fetched. Still, after everything we've seen lately, even the unbelievable felt possible. There's more, Rieger added. Demon possessions are increasing. Portals are opening again. My father believes they're coming back to finish what they started centuries ago. Why and how? Keenan asked. Rieger lowered his voice. Because the magic of this world is fading. Some of the oldest elves say an ancient power once protected us, but it's weakening. That's a good question for Reggie, I muttered, glancing around the room. At the bar, Grog was watching us. When our eyes met, he shook his head and turned back to his work. Keenan chuckled. Us talking probably reminds him of our childhood schemes. Rieger smiled. You two were a handful back then. Glad to see you've matured, mostly. We laughed, and I asked, so what can we do? Gather information, Rieger said. Knowledge is power, but we're short on numbers to fend off a large-scale invasion. Scouts have already been sent to other islands for intel. A thought struck me. What about Wilhelm's house? Maybe there's something there. Rieger and Keenan exchanged glances. The guards already questioned him and searched his home, Keenan said. Yes, but they might have missed something, I replied. Keenan nodded. As a paladin, I'd have the authority to search it. He paused, then smiled. Just like old times. Let's go. We exchanged quick smiles, downed our drinks, left a few coins on the table, and filed out, none of us noticing Grog watching us closely as we left. When we arrived at Wilhelm's house, a note pinned to the door read, Under investigation for a coup on Grissom City. Subject is under arrest. Must be the right place, I said with a grin. We opened the door and stepped inside. The house was a modest one-room structure of timber and stone, topped with a thatch roof. It felt lived in, functional, and cold. A tall, slightly tarnished mirror leaned against one wall, reflecting light from a single window. The hearth was dead and dark, adding to the chill. In one corner, a simple wooden bed with neatly folded woolen blankets sat beside a pile of scattered books and clothing. Across from it stood a sturdy desk cluttered with parchments, ink bottles, and half-written business notes. Nearby, a small table with two mismatched chairs rested near the hearth, bearing the remnants of a meal, a half loaf of bread, and a half-empty tankard. The space was organized but neglected, like someone who valued function over comfort. Rieger frowned, scanning the room. This doesn't feel like the home of a councilman. Yeah, I agreed. He was a last-minute addition, the most recent vote. He came from another island. Supposedly no one I know ever figured out which one. Just seemed odd how quickly he won everyone over. Keenan shook his head. I don't miss politics at all. He knelt beside the bed, beginning to search for anything hidden. Rieger moved to examine the desk while I turned my attention to a chest near the mirror on the far side of the room. I knelt beside the chest, careful not to disturb the scattered books and folded clothes nearby. The lid creaked as I opened it, revealing a jumble of blankets, old boots, and a few sealed jars. Nothing suspicious, at least not yet. We were so focused on our searches that none of us heard the footsteps approaching. The door burst wide open with a loud thud. Startled, I turned too fast, tripped, and bumped into the mirror. I caught it just before it fell, steadying it with both hands. Then I looked up. Grog stood in the doorway, arms crossed, scowling. Don't you know it's illegal to break into someone else's house? He grunted. I chuckled, setting the mirror upright. You scared me half to death. Keenan stepped forward calmly. I've taken it upon myself to help investigate the murders, he said. One of the suspects live here. We're searching for anything that might lead to more evidence and more answers. Grog scratched his head. By the mountain, they really did a number on your noggin. You sound like some kind of lawyer. He shook his head and then laughed. I know what you're doing. Just came to see if I could help. I grinned, though you did nearly curse us all by breaking that mirror. Grog's smirk faded. Bah, superstitious nonsense. He grabbed a nearby mug and hurled it at the mirror. No, I shouted, reaching out instinctively. But instead of shattering, the mug vanished straight through the glass. We all froze, staring in stunned silence. The mirror shimmered faintly, its surface rippling like water. The room fell quiet. Even Grog stopped moving, his hand still raised from the throw. Keenan stepped closer, eyes narrowed. Did that just... Yeah, I said, voice low. It went through. Rieger moved beside me, studying the mirror with intense focus. It's not glass, not anymore. Grog grunted. Well, that's new. Keenan reached out, hesitated, then touched the surface. His fingers passed through like mist. He pulled back quickly, eyes wide. It's a portal, Rieger said. But to where? I glanced at the others. Only one way to find out. Grog snorted. You're not seriously thinking of stepping through that thing? Keenan looked at me. We've seen worse. True, I said, but let's make a plan first. Grog broke the silence, his voice low and weary. Please don't do anything stupid. Keenan smiled and without hesitation stepped through the portal. Grog shook his head. Like that. Rieger nodded to Grog. If we don't come back in an hour, send word to Gam. Grog let out a heavy sigh as Rieger followed him. I lingered, watching the mirror ripple faintly. Grog shook his head. Well, I said with a grin, I guess you know what's about to happen. And they say dwarves are stupid and stubborn, Grog muttered, a wry smile tugging at his lips. He stepped closer, placing a hand on my shoulder. Please be careful. I didn't notice it at the time, but he slipped a small stone into my pocket and turned and walked away. I chuckled quietly. Old softy. Grog muttered something under his breath, then grunted. But if you end up in a demon's pantry, don't come crying to me. I took a breath, stepped forward, and reached into the mirror. Felt cold, like plunging my hand into a mountain stream. Then I stepped through. The sensation was strange, like falling sideways through cold mist. Then I landed, boots crunching softly on damp rock.